Good morning. It's Wednesday, March 24th. I'm Jason Stanton. This is my morning musing. I am reading from John chapter 12, verses 24 to 26. That's the basis for the devotion I'm reading from today, too. Very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, there will my servant be also. Whoever serves me, the Father will honor. And that's the text that Hannah Garrity, one of the contributors toward our Lenten devotion, again and again, that's the text that Hannah Garrity made her art around. This is called Drawn to Love. And so she has a border within her artwork here as these doves and the wheat's growing into, well, now that you've seen it, she says, I love borders. I place them in my artwork so that I can break them. They set up a reiteration of balance. They allow for a secondary focal point. They introduce a conversation. In this image, the wheat breaks through the border. It's very intentional that she has to do that. The image incorporates a border representing the loving constraints that Jesus' ministry places on our lives and choices. What would Jesus do? Jesus would love. And that was the phrase that caught my attention and imagination. That the border represents the loving constraints that Jesus' ministry places on our lives and our choices. And I was thinking about different loving constraints that I have imposed as a parent and experienced as a person and as a follower of God. The first constraint I could think of as a parent, they told us at the hospital, baby, I'd never been around a baby in my life, really. I mean, I'm the oldest. I'm the youngest in my family, and so I'm not the oldest of anyone, younger than me, as far as a little baby brother or baby sister. I didn't babysit as a teenager or anything like that. I've been around some babies, but I've never had to deal with babies until I was a father. And they told us at the hospital, here's how to swaddle her. She'll like this. And it turned out she required swaddling. Our oldest, who's now 16, we would wrap her up in a baby burrito, we called it, and just about all the time, every day. When she was constrained, she'd relax and sleep. When her arms were allowed to be out, she was all over the place, peeling at stuff and scratching herself and doing all kinds of stuff. Put her arms in that baby burrito and went right to calm right down for her. That is a loving constraint. What was the next one? 5-point harness seatbelt for a child. I mean, I remember growing up sleeping, and I wasn't the only one. I had friends who have told me since then they would sleep in the wheel well of the back seat, the middle between the two seats in the back seat of a Crown Victoria, there was a hump. That was a great pillow, perfect for sleeping on long road trips to grandparents' houses. We wear seatbelts now, right? That's a loving constraint. I had somebody else tell me that they'd sleep in the behind the back seat, between the back seat and the window, that was also a nice place to sleep. Anyway, it's safer to wear a seatbelt. Or rules like come home before dark. A curfew when your child's in high school. Those are loving constraints. Limiting desserts. I have a feeling that if I didn't limit the dessert intake of my children, especially my number 2 child, bad things would happen. I think he'd get sick on ice cream most nights, which I don't blame him. Like if I didn't have the loving constraint on me to not eat ice cream every day, oh man, I would be a large, happy person. No, probably not so happy. But anyway, speed limits, that's another loving constraint. We want to go faster, but it's just not safe. So some of these constraints are for our own safety. Some are because we can't calm ourselves down without being put into that baby burrito. Others are just giving shape to life. And this was another loving constraint I thought about. We have a faith building block at church for, I think it's 4th grade when they learn about the commandments. I might have that wrong, but let's say it's right. Anyway, they have a game. And we sit the kids all down and we give them random objects. Here's a sponge and a puzzle and a spoon and a book and some measuring tape. Go. And every year it's the same. They look at each other and they're like, go what? Do it. Do what? The game. What is the game? Here's the objects. And so then they'll start to negotiate with each other like, well, if I bang the spoon against the sponge 4 times, I get a point? Are they out of bounds? Like there's no rules, no boundaries, no borders. There's no shape to the game. And so it's awful, right? Like you can't play a game that doesn't have any rules, that doesn't have any boundaries. Everybody's doing their own thing all the time. And so I'm reading what I wrote earlier. The commandments, the creeds, the good news to love our neighbor, they are limits. But they're limits offered in love. To keep us in love rather than to have us lose ourselves in our own limitations. Because that's the truth of it is, either God puts limits on things or we live in our own limitations because we are limited. And so it could be seen that God's limitations are what free us to live far beyond our own limitations. That's the good news today, is that in God's limits, we get to live beyond our own limitations. And so today is a good day to thank God for the loving constraints on our lives as we keep faith alive.